Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to yet another Regions Rising event in 2021. My name is Liz Ritchie and I have the honour of being the CEO of the Regional Australia Institute, and it's such a pleasure to be hosting you all here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands on which we meet across Australia, and especially here in Wodonga. Wodonga is the Indigenous word for bulrushes, highlighting this region's vital link with the Murray River. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. I'd also like to acknowledge Senator the Honourable Bridget McKenzie, the Minister for Regionalisation, Regional Communications and Regional Education, the Albury Mayor Kevin Mack, my fellow panellists Rob Clayton from Nutrient Ag Solutions and Gavin Williams from NBN Co. I'd like to also welcome our Regional Australia Council members and our Regional Activator Alliance members, and also those online, and to all of our distinguished guests. Today's event is better known as a hybrid, with an intimate audience here in Wodonga, and also virtually we have more than 1,000 people joining us across the country. So welcome to you all. This series would not be possible without the incredible support of our sponsors, Nutrient Ag Solution and NBN Co. Thank you both for riding the wave of 2021 as we've grappled with a few scheduling changes. Both these organisations are also proud Regional Australia Council members, and they have helped us shape the Institute's work on regionalisation, which I'll talk to today. We are now 18 corporate members and growing, with many online, as I said, so thank you for your support. Before we go any further, there's just a couple of housekeeping matters to attend to. Mobiles on silent. Of course, we do expecting some media to join us, and they're always welcome. And lastly, we love you to get involved on socials so you can kickstart the conversation at #RegionsRising. Today, we are continuing the national conversation about regionalisation, and we ask for your involvement. Later in the program, we'll be taking questions from the online audience, and I invite you to post in the Q&A section on the screen. The team at the RAI will be doing their best to get through as many as possible. But first, the Regional Australia Institute is so delighted to be hosting the Minister for her first keynote address on this critical portfolio of regionalisation. It was both an important and significant signal when the government emerged with this portfolio, and we know that Senator McKenzie fought hard to make it happen. Whilst we welcome the relocation and decentralisation of government departments and agencies from capitals to regions, regionalisation is about so much more than that. Put simply, regionalisation is about ensuring that regional residents and communities are given an opportunity to reach their full potential that's equal to their capital city counterparts. That means being able to access education, training, connectivity, infrastructure, housing, healthcare, jobs, recreation, everything that makes a place not just livable or workable, but enjoyable. And why is this important? Because when our regions thrive, so does Australia as a whole. Regional Australia is home to more than 9 million people, almost 1/3 of our population, and it generates 40% of our national economic output. It was the engine room which kept our economy ticking over during the global financial crisis, and it has done so again during the coronavirus. Yet for too long, the national focus has been metrocentric. Fortunately, that is starting to shift. As I love to say, regional Australia This is our time. To hear more about this rise of the regions and the government's vision, I am delighted to introduce our guest of honour today, Senator the Honourable Bridget McKenzie, to provide her address. Minister McKenzie needs little introduction, but formalities are important. Bridget McKenzie was elected to the Senate of Victoria in 2010 and re-elected in 2016. Bridget has held various positions within the National Party and Parliament, including Deputy Leader of the Nationals, Minister for Regional Communications, Rural Health and Sport, Minister for Regional Services, Local Government and Decentralisation, and Minister for Agriculture. Bridget was born in rural Victoria and is proud and passionate about regional Australia. And I'd like to invite her to the podium. Thank you, Minister.
Well, thank you very, very much, Liz, and thank you for outlining why backing sustainable, prosperous regions is actually in the national interest. It's also in the Nationals' interest, but it's definitely in the national interest. I'd like to begin my remarks today by acknowledging traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and to the 1,000 online, wherever you happen to be in our wide brown land, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Mayor Mac, it's great to be back home. A lot of rain, hope the dam's holding. But we have, for those who haven't stayed overnight in Albury-Wodonga, we've had solid rain all night. So we're hoping the Hume Dam, it's good news for irrigators downstream. 48 years ago, last month, a very tall, silver-haired man stood near to the same spot where I stand now and signed an agreement with 2 state premiers that envisaged would launch the border towns of Albury and Wodonga into the rival city to Canberra. This man had a vision of building a second Australian inland city between Sydney and Melbourne with a population of at least 300,000 by the year 2000. As we know, the former Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam's decentralisation policy was literally, in every sense of the word, a field of dreams. Large tracts of land were acquired for cheap housing, a bureaucracy was set up, and a push to decentralise began in earnest. But then it faltered. With insufficient local or national support, by 1995, the Albury-Wodonga Development Corporation was wound up and its remaining assets sold. Whitlam built the field, but they didn't come, or at least not in the way that he envisaged. Today, our twin cities have grown into vibrant, busy and important regional centres, straddling the Murray, with all the perennial complexities and frustrations of living under 2 state jurisdictions brings. But the joint population of Albury-Wodonga has more than doubled from that time, and very close to breaking the 100,000 barrier. And Wodonga, once thought of the lesser of the 2, has come of age in a way that many of us couldn't have even imagined a decade ago. The story is very, very familiar to you all. Perhaps not so familiar is the story of another tall man. He had blonde hair, and I would have considered him, as many of the ladies of that day did, very, very handsome, who developed his own decentralisation policy, but one that was centred in pragmatism and practicalities. That man was the Country Party leader, Doug Anthony. His policy was controlled by 3 separate departments that were under the responsibility of one political party. Anthony had selected 7 areas for accelerated development over a 25-year period, one in each mainland state: Gladstone, Coffs Harbour, Bathurst, Albury, Yallourn, Murray Bridge and Albany. Anthony's roadmap was very different to Whitlam's, and as he said at the time, if you're going to be really effective, if there's going to be substantial decentralisation, it has got to be on the regional growth concept. In other words, an area has to be designated and government direction and resources have to be put in to make it work. I believe we have to use this approach in addition to the existing decentralisation measures, he said. My point is that you need both. You need vision and practicality to actually achieve results in this vexed, but enormously important policy sphere. And because it's long-term policy, we really need some sensible bipartisanship. That'll go a long way to actually achieving our goals. Attempts at population shifting and development have been part of the dreaming and scheming of federal government level throughout the last century, from migration programs in the 1920s to the regional development schemes of the 1930s and the post-World War II reconstruction of the 1940s. But the period from 1967 to 1973 of Anthony and Whitlam marked the beginning of serious policy thinking about decentralisation in Australia. When I took on this portfolio in June, I insisted that my title was not the Minister for Decentralisation, but rather Regionalisation. I didn't realise it would actually cause such a stir at the time. Why the distinction? I think for us here in Australia in particular, decentralisation evokes the idea of transferring public servants and government services to different and often well-deserving parts of the country. Important and something we should do, but I don't believe it's sufficient, particularly at a strategic level, to see the prosperity and sustainability that is possible through a whole-of-government approach. Regionalisation, by contrast, is action-orientated. It's about putting the regions front and centre, not through one single policy, but an integrated network of policies and initiatives across government that addresses population, infrastructure, connectivity, livability, just to name a few. It's about providing current and future Australians with greater choice in where they live, where they learn, where they raise their families and build their careers and businesses. A choice beyond the increasingly unaffordable and congested city limits of Sydney, Melbourne, Perth and Brisbane. And it was great to spend a couple of days back in Melbourne this week, but boy, couldn't wait to hit the Hume and head north and get home. It is also about backing in existing regional businesses, our entrepreneurs and industry to develop and grow whilst encouraging others to invest and set up shop in a regional city or town. We've got to remove those barriers to innovation and growth and unlock new opportunities, because these are the generators of local jobs and wealth into the regions. That actually creates communities where people want to come, live and work. And we've seen an organic, natural shift, I think, as a result of COVID over last 18 months. The greater goal of regionalisation is to be a better, stronger nation, with regional cities that are underpinned by innovative industries built on the competitive advantage of each region, that are supported by a skilled and stable workforce. There also just happen to be, as we all know, that come from the country, great places to live. For the past 18 months or more, regional Australia has faced a range of challenges, from bushfires to floods, COVID-19, particularly for border towns, to global supply chain squeezes and trade wars. And yet again, our regions have proven their resilience, their appetite and capacity to transform under pressure and to respond. That's because our regions are built around industries that are modern, globally competitive. They're high-tech, efficient, research development investors with highly skilled and trained workforces. That's actually what they are. We all know that. Sometimes I think those in capital cities don't know. That is the type of industries and businesses that are the heart of our regional towns and capitals. We believe that there is a bright future for agriculture, mining, manufacturing and tourism, and we back those industries. Our challenge to reduce emissions towards 2050 also presents us with a unique opportunity, because regionalisation is a positive step towards lower emissions as it addresses congestion burden that our current capital cities carry. The success of the regions that we're currently experiencing, accelerated under COVID-19, didn't just happen. It took hard work and on-the-ground leadership. It's a direct result of the entrepreneurial spirit and drive of our local people. Our infrastructure investment, particularly at a federal and state level, and government policy to connect regional Australia, to enable its products to reach markets across the globe. Those in the knowledge and creative economies, like those that work at companies such as Telstra, Deloitte and Regionalisation, are now able to take their jobs with them to new places where there is good internet bandwidth and a decent mobile signal. Improved digital connectivity in the regions has opened up new towns and cities for these workers. If Australia is going to face these challenges, both economic and social, then we need to continue to improve our focus on the regions. And that means reconciling the current divide between city and regions, both in terms of outlook, aspiration and comparative wellbeing. Regionalisation will be absolutely central to this. Let me be very, very clear. Our government backs regional Australia. Based on current and previous investments in the regions, it is likely there will be over $100 billion going into the regions in the decade to 2030 across various government areas, excluding health and social security measures. And that's based on advice from my department. As Minister for Regionalisation, I'm seeking to make sure that investment is targeted, coordinated and strategic in its approach, that we ensure that every single taxpayer dollar spent delivers maximal benefit to the regions as we leverage, rather than these discrete investments scattered across the country. By bringing that under a strategic framework, I believe we can leverage that spend to an even greater outcome. Because it's not just in the region's interest, this is actually in the national interest. So the horizon I envisage is bigger than Whitlam's, it's bigger than Anthony's. It's bigger and it's broader. I envisage a future Australia that has many regional cities with populations well in excess of 300,000. Inland cities and coastal cities right across our continent. In an ideal world, I'd like to see a target of 50% of future population growth in this country to be occurring out here with us in the regions. We can't dictate that as a government, obviously, but if we're serious about reducing emissions and growing sustainable, prosperous regions, then it's actually what we should be doing. Take California as just one example. In 1906, there was an earthquake, and California decided to shift their state capital from San Francisco to Sacramento. And after embracing decentralisation, that state alone has 75 cities with populations of more than 100,000 people. Now, before I explain which cities this policy might constitute in the Australian context, because every local mayor will have their hand up to be part of the list, it's important to pause and note that not all regional centres will take up the invitation to grow. Many with strong local leadership and ambition will. Whitlam's dream failed in large part because the local community were not taken on the journey, because of a disconnect between the bureaucracy and the people. Our policy, and hopefully it will be bipartisan, will not be one implemented by government decree or imposed on communities. Many towns and smaller regional cities are fiercely protective of their lifestyles, their uniqueness and their identities and their size. As the songwriter Don Walker so beautifully captured in one of Australia's favourite songs about a country town, and I won't sing it, I'll say it, there's no change, there's no pace, everything within its place. Like so many of you, I grew up in a country town. I'm a proud graduate of Benalla East Primary, just about 100 clicks down the road. There are a few things more comforting than the familiarity of an Australian country town. I know as a teenager it can get a little claustrophobic, but it is actually a strength and a uniqueness that you find nowhere else. On the other hand, it's being increasingly recognised that as Australia's population grows over coming years, and it will, we cannot, nor should we, continue to concentrate our growth on capital cities. Now, we say it a lot, we've got to make it happen because they just keep getting bigger and they're not any healthier, particularly Sydney and Melbourne. The effects of rapid growth in our capitals are already being felt, reflected in rising congestion, bottlenecked infrastructure, skyrocketing house prices and longer commutes to work and to access essential services, leading to a myriad of environmental, economic and health costs. Regionalisation offers an alternative path that can relieve the congestion burden of population growth from our capitals, whilst offering better settlement outcomes for all Australians, both in our regions and our cities. Furthermore, regionalisation has the potential to help reduce emissions, while people living in smaller regional capitals are likely to have shorter commuting times, more efficient trips, more opportunities to walk or cycle to work. That's got to be a better outcome for the whole nation. But other places want to be much more, and they see a future in this type of framework. They want to combine lifestyle and environment with opportunity and prosperity. Cities that have civic leadership, that have ambition, that have businessmen and women who want to invest and build bright futures for their children and their children's children. We're already seeing it in such places as Dubbo, where Gerry Harvey is backing local developers to build Dubbo's first multi-residential development, number 1 Church Street, to address demand for housing, to provide for a changing demographic. In September, we saw Mars, Wrigley, back manufacturing here with a $30 million investment in its Ballarat factory. It's also pushing to attract more STEM graduates, and that's got to be a good thing. In Bendigo, the partnership between La Trobe University and the Bendigo Manufacturing Group and the City of Greater Bendigo, with a $2 million commitment from the Commonwealth, has seen the establishment of a regional advanced manufacturing and innovation hub. If you haven't connected with these guys, do. They are absolutely passionate about what they do, and I think we can really harness the can-do attitude of our regional universities with the can-do attitude of our local businesses and really leverage that to a global outcome. In Karratha, the local government there has stepped up to provide a new mixed-use, medium-density development to address housing needs and provide space for new and existing businesses. Why? Because they want to grow, be attractive, be livable, and not be stereotyped as a dusty mining province. In Tumut, we see another great country family, the Pratt family, through Visy, investing in sustainable forestry. Rather than denigrating what is the ultimate renewable resource, Australian forestry should be celebrated from every corner of this country. It is managed using globally best practice and best science, and actually can contribute to the net zero task as we store carbon in those things. But they're only good for about 30 years, then you've got to chop them down and do it all again. And I think it's a great story, but we've got this happening in Tumut and all around the country. As such, I've asked my department to identify a group of regional cities that have met a defined set of criteria based in research that could be used as future cities of rapid growth. So they have to be estimated more than 25,000 and less than 250,000 people. Once you get to 250,000 people, you can pretty much kick it off yourself. They need to be at least 90 minutes from a capital city, a state capital, situated in every state and territory, except the ACT, obviously, that's a city-state. But we know population alone is not the only determining factor to future growth and prosperity. Australia's geostrategic interests also have to be taken into account, such as manufacturing capabilities, proximity to critical raw materials and key infrastructure. This will be supported by the analysis of 14 factors that indicate which regional centres are performing well, and with additional investment and coordinated use of policy levers and effort across the Commonwealth can become significant economic centres. These factors include, and there's nothing new to people that tune into these addresses here, digital connectivity and consumerism, migration from capital cities to regional cities, economic self-sufficiency and diversity of the local economy, skills shortage and inequitable job distribution, housing affordability and availability, shifting to work from home, transport congestion, population, scale and growth, human capitals, health infrastructure, drinking water supplies. Would you built some of our capitals where you have, if you had a thought about water a couple of 100 years ago. Infrastructure investment, future industry potential and livability. As a government, we want to invest in regional centres that are already well primed for growth, that capitalise on the prosperity of regional Australia, supporting private sector investment and creating jobs and economic opportunity that is crucial for both regional and national recovery from COVID-19. We want to back those regional cities with proactive, coordinated and integrated approaches to regional investment that is designed to unlock the potential opportunities. If you're ready, if you have the ideas, if you know what you need to get there, I want to back you. I want to back you and your vision for your people, your place, your space. What are the drivers of people that want to move to a regional city? There are many, but I'm going to name 5. Jobs, jobs, Jobs are the first three. You know, and this isn't fruit-picking jobs. These are serious, world-class careers, well-paid careers. We need that to attract particularly young people back after their education, if they've moved away for that, and young families. The next one is affordability, an affordable house and the cost of living. And the final one is livability and all that that entails. On this last point, there's something that can be done now of any civic leader that's thinking about the decades ahead, because this is a long-term journey that we're on. We need to keep in mind why people move to regional cities and towns and this organic shift that's occurred as a result of COVID. We've got a net exodus out of capital cities in excess of 54,000 people, when for decades every conversation's been about the brain drain out of the regions. Now, yes, it's causing pressures, particularly around housing affordability, but it's exciting. Why are people wanting to come to the regions? And I think it is about community. I think it is about the natural environment. And COVID has forced so many of us to rethink what it means, what our lives, have that existential conversation with our loved ones about what are we here for, what are we doing, what are we planning on. For those of us that live out in the regions, we live on the land, we rely on nature to support us in our endeavours. We were conservationists long before the environment was weaponised for ideology, as it has in recent decades. We are the ultimate pragmatists. We care for our waterways, we care for our soils, we care, and we see living with nature as very much part of what we do. So it may seem counterintuitive, but if there's one thing that could be done immediately to improve the future livability, it is actually for that provision of nature. We need to preserve and protect what we yearn for. If people choose to live away from large cities, they do so in part because they want to connect with the natural environment. I don't think it's just me. Great cities, whether it be New York, Manchester or Montreal, have planned green space for their citizens to enjoy. Regional cities, with an eye to the future when you're a lot more than a Sleepy Hollow, could be doing the groundwork now to support and preserve the spaces that already make them attractive and livable, like nearby nature reserves, river walks and gardens, spaces for people to commune. I just want to talk about, just briefly, like in 1996, the National Party and the Liberal Party, but it was the National Party minister at the time, shadow minister, took to this election, to the 96 election, the desire to complete the duplication of the Pacific Highway between Sydney and Brisbane over a 20-year period. Long way away. People just considering in an election thing their back pocket. No, we ended up winning. And over that last 2 decades that has been completed, values in places like Taree and all along the mid-coast have doubled. And it is again the little old National Party in government that has fought for an infrastructure investment over the next 20 years called the Inland Rail, which will also see values double right along its track between Melbourne and Brisbane, and going forward Brisbane and Gladstone over the next 2 decades. So it's those connections of road, of rail, of air and digital that are critical, I think, to growing regional growth and prosperity. All the aspiration and dreaming, though, will not get us very far unless there's someone prepared to fight the fight now and secure our future. And that is the pledge of myself as Minister, of my political party, the National Party, in government with the Liberals, and of our government. And I hope the Labor Party joins us on that journey, because this is a vision that has to extend way beyond electoral cycles if it's to be realised. My political hero, without a doubt, is the former US President Teddy Roosevelt, a fellow hunter and gatherer. Can't beat organic venison. It also helps with feral pest management. And the man who is perhaps more singularly responsible for preserving America's national parks than any other person. He was also on the right side of politics for my liking. Roosevelt had many things to say about nature, and I'll leave you with one of his quotes to ponder on. Here is your country. Cherish these natural wonders, cherish the natural resources, cherish the history and the romance as a sacred heritage for your children and your children's children. Do not let selfish men or greedy interests skin your country of its beauty, its riches, or its romance. Now is the time to seize this unique moment and support our regions to reach their fullest potential whilst preserving what makes them unique. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. Exceptional presentation, and it's so wonderful to hear that pledge. It's so wonderful to hear your comments that the greater good is to be better, to be a better and stronger nation. Also, really excited to hear the pledge about 50% of population growth, occurring in the regions, which we are also well aligned to. But perhaps more than anything, your vision for the long term, your vision for the bipartisan support that we know is so critical, and that will be the piece to create the lasting legacy. So thank you very, very much. Over the last 12 months, more people in Australia have turned their hearts and minds to the opportunities available in our regions than in any other time since Federation. To support this transformation, the RAI has a bold vision that we'd like to share. More Australians than ever before are wanting to make a life in the regions. At the Regional Australia Institute, we get that. But we also understand that for all the excitement of making the move, there is also some trepidation. What will our new life be like? Will we make new friends and fit into the community? How will our kids cope with the change? And perhaps the biggest question that we hear, will we find well-paying and meaningful work? Everyone's experience is different, but overwhelmingly, metro movers tell us that their decision to go regional is the best decision they've ever made. Over the last few months, the RAI, in partnership with the Regional Activators Alliance, has been bringing to life the stories of many metro movers around the country as part of our national campaign called Move to More. Take Todd and Austin Parish, who moved from Brisbane to Gundawindi in southern Queensland with their 3 daughters. When we asked Todd about his family's move, he said, "Our oldest daughter suffered from separation anxiety, and every day was a struggle to get her to school until we moved to Gundy. On her very first day at St Mary's, a little girl with a friend asked her to play with them, and ever since, we've never had any struggles at all." For Danica Yates, who moved with her family to Temora in New South Wales in the Riverina, the shift has given her precious time with her children. She says, "I used to drive 50 minutes to work with our children, and they were at before and after school care. Now I take the kids to school and sports training through the week for the very first time. I've also been able to attend Mother's Day morning tea at her children's school. It's made a big difference to her as a parent and to their family. And she hasn't had to sacrifice her career. In fact, after moving, she landed a great job as the assistant principal at Temora Public School. And perhaps the best compliment you will ever pay a community is summed by Sarah Thompson, who moved from Melbourne to Shepparton in northern Victoria with her partner. Her words are simple but so telling. "We have found our forever place." These are just some of the inspiring stories from entrepreneurs, business people, artists, teachers, tradies, people from all walks of life who've embraced their new communities and regional living. Regional Australia is undergoing an incredible renaissance, and as the CEO of the RAI, I could not be more excited about our future. It's a future that I dreamt of as a young country girl from Deniliquin. As a 15-year-old, I was lucky to receive a scholarship to head away to boarding school and leave my home, which was hard but exciting. Fortunately, I was a reasonable tennis player and it counted a lot at APS schools. But why I share that is that it exposed to me at a very young age what I call the best of both worlds. It shaped me. When I graduated from uni, I headed home to Denny to be the first festival director for the famous Denny Ute Muster, something I'm very proud of. But what formed in my mind at the age of 21 was the dream to chase a career in the regions, a dream to one day see professional roles like we see today available in rural and regional Australia. Back then, to make it, you were encouraged to head to the city and climb that ladder. Now, some 20 years later, we are witnessing a seismic shift where professional roles and regional living is starting to be normalised. COVID has changed the notion of how we work. Corporate Australia is waking to the fact that not all the best talent lives in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane or Perth. And if that talent is in the city, they may wish they weren't. As the world continues to grapple with the generational shift, business and industry need to get ready and to be prepared to provide choice and flexibility. Whilst I've said many times we would never have wished a global pandemic to turn the tide, it appears that it did just that. If history has taught us anything, there is opportunity in every challenge. And now, like never before, it's our time. It's regional Australia's time to shine. In February this year, I was thrilled to join the National Farmers Federation and address the National Press Club on regionalisation. So what does regionalisation look like? And what does it mean to the average Australian? At the RAI, it is where we see more balanced, equitable, sustainable, and ultimately prosperous nation with better outcomes for all Australians. If we are to realise the future we wish to create, we need a bold vision with some very big ideas and an innumerable number of beating hearts. So our vision for regionalisation is to, quite simply, rebalance the nation, to build a lasting legacy that celebrates the strength and diversity of our nation, that enables our cities to thrive through more manageable and cost-effective growth, but importantly, encourages greater utilisation of our rural and regional communities. Let us not forget one of our landmark reports launched in 2019 called Regional Population Growth, Are We Ready? This report spoke to the factors of agglomeration and highlighted that for the nation to experience greater productivity gains, we need to focus on our second-tier cities. This has been the experience of our OECD counterparts. Our role as a think tank is to provide knowledge and insights, but beyond this, our role is to be visionary. Our role is to advocate for a better future that encompasses the whole nation. What do we want our country to look like, to feel like? How do we want to shape our best future? Globally, the world has been asking these very questions. How do we transition, not simply through a sustainability lens, but through a lifestyle lens? We work longer, we play less. We don't have enough time with our family and our friends, and volunteers are hard to come by. I get it. We are all stretched. So regionalisation is a societal shift to bring balance whilst accelerating growth, These two paradigms can coexist. The Great Resignation is gathering global headlines. But what if, in Australia, we drove the Great Regionalisation? By leveraging technology, connectivity and networks, we will continue to build a thriving economy. But we must recognise that society is seeking a change and we must listen. Decision makers must listen. And more than anything, we must prepare for this movement that is upon us. At the RAI, our vision is to showcase the growing level of sophistication in our regional economies that are thriving but need more services and investment because their value proposition is already strong. Our vision is to close the gap of inequality and to elevate business, industry and government to see the vast array of opportunities that can exist when we think collectively and plan for the future. Equally, our vision is to work with rural and regional economies that will soon become the next big thing, because truly it's only a matter of time. We are focused on regions in transition. We are focused on livability and how you can attract and retain the people that you need. Australians are already voting with their feet and regions want and need more people. Regional net migration is at record levels and the last ABS data showing net gain of 45,000 from March 2020 to March 2021. Not only are people leaving our capitals for the country, but those who already live in the regions are choosing to stay rather than head to the big metro centres. We call this the stayer effect. The latest Regional Movers Index, a partnership with RAI and the Commonwealth Bank, shows that net migration to the regions rose 14% in the September quarter. And since 2019, the RMI data, which captures CBA's 10 million customer base, shows movement to the regions has more than doubled. While the Gold Coast was again the most popular destination and followed by Sunshine Coast, Geelong and those larger second-tier cities, what is a very promising trend is the inland rural towns such as Shepparton, Moree, Wagga Wagga, Mount Gambier and Murray Bridge also starting to grow. Australians want more time, more space, more connection to nature, community and family. They want less stress, less anxiety, less congestion, and ultimately they want less debt. Our research has told us this. In March this year, we launched the first national awareness campaign called Move to More that promotes the opportunities of living in the regions. Our research told us that 1 in 5 city dwellers want to make the move. Move to More could not have come at a better time to try to match the now record numbers of regional job vacancies that have reached over 71,000, and that is advertised roles. This is also about looking at what those jobs are, and the hottest in demand, as the Minister alerted us to, are those professional roles, those skilled roles, skilled tradespeople, doctors, engineers, accountants. We have a moment in time to capitalise on this newfound appreciation of regional Australia, to harness the spirit of our times and to build a future for our nation that is more resilient, sustainable and prosperous. We can do this through regionalisation. We can do this by rebalancing the nation. It was very encouraging that Senator McKenzie, only months into her new job, made developing a population policy a priority. The Minister wants to encourage, as you've heard this morning, businesses and families to move to the regions, creating vibrant regional communities and great inland cities. The RAI shares this vision. But to ensure regional Australia's growth is not ad hoc, to address the pressure points that have always come with change, we need a solid plan, a plan which is bipartisan. Whilst there have been a range of strategies over the years, we believe that this year marks the turning point. We know that organisations such as the Business Council of Australia and the Farmers Federation are also focused on this, conscious of the turning point. We welcome this and we look forward to working together. We know the federal government will start to set the direction and provide the building blocks, but we know that they cannot do it alone. Regional development is ultimately a complex system that is integrated at every level. The RAI would like to support the government and collaborate widely to aid the development of a cohesive national framework which brings together goals of regional development and growth. A framework that would shape the long-term direction of the nation. Regionalisation is essentially the Institute's core work, so we will embrace this opportunity and the renewed national focus. The framework that we are building would not compete with or contradict the valuable work that has already been done by governments, industry and community organisations. Rather, the framework that we are developing draws together common priorities under 6 pillars, areas where regional Australia is not quite reaching its potential or is lagging behind metropolitan areas. And these are population, jobs and skills, livability, leadership, productivity and innovation, and sustainability and resilience. Our regionalisation framework will provide Australia with a tangible and measurable goals to work towards, with a range of targets and headline actions. A draft framework will be released at our Regions Rising Summit in June next year. Corporate Australia is also committed and on board. Working with us on the framework is our Regional Australia Council, RAC 2031. The Council brings together some of the country's most influential corporations, businesses who are committed to making regions a priority, whether it be through their employee base, their supply chains, or business operations. Ensuring regional Australia takes its rightful place in our national story will not be without its challenges. Take housing, for example. The unprecedented surge in demand has led to a shortage of housing in some of our country and coastal towns. This has highlighted that over the long term, regional home building has not kept pace with population growth. Regional Australia's population grew by an average of 76,000 people per annum in the decade to 2020, while homes approved for construction declined in 5 of those 10 years. Due to this, we know that some regional areas are feeling constrained. These are issues that we are working through as part of our Intergovernmental Shared Inquiry program and through our National Policy Forum. But rather than see this as a challenge, we see this as an opportunity. As a country, we must focus on meeting the demand for labour and materials to build the houses that we need in the regions. This month, our latest Move to More TV ad is inviting potential movers to make a name for themselves in regional Australia. To forge a career in the country, we need builders, electricians, plumbers, and bricklayers. The demand and opportunity is there. In the long term, we need more education and vocational skills training based in the regions so that communities can grow their own workforce to suit their needs. But none of these issues are insurmountable if we have the right regionalisation framework, a framework developed and backed by all regional stakeholders and supported across the political spectrum. There is a national movement. That will mean we need to rethink and reimagine our future, the future of work and the future of life. These are not small questions. These are transformative questions. Regionalisation, it's our time. Thank you. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's now time to move to our regionalisation panel, and I'm going to invite our panellists up to join me on the stage, but also our moderator, Sam DeMarco. I'd like to make your way up. Sam DeMarco is a very familiar face to the RAI, a great friend. He's also the General Manager of Regional and Remote NBN. And if you missed his incredible feature that was in the Australian magazine last year as part of our regionalisation work, he lives in beautiful Dorrigo in New South Wales, and he is, I guess, a complete champion for all things regionalisation in both his life and his work. So welcome, Sam, and thank you for being our moderator today.
Thank you. And thank you, Liz. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to lead this next topic as we lean into a national conversation on regionalisation. I am a huge proponent of regionalisation, as Liz was saying. 4 years ago, I moved my family up to Dorrigo, and I was very fortunate to be able to take my job up there with me. And the job I hold is normally a role that would be otherwise reserved for a head office of Sydney or Melbourne. And so it was very important that we were able to do that. And the support of NBN, the culture we lead, and the trust in that scenario has been fantastic. But it's not just the trust in an organisation, it's about the critical services and the access to that really drove that decision for myself and family. And those decisions and infrastructure that allows us to live, work and play in the way that we otherwise would have in Sydney, which was the town that we departed. Now, very quickly, NBN, we remain very committed to this regionalisation agenda. We know that we've got a significant part to play. We know that connectivity is a huge component of that and an enabler of many things. 2 years ago, we launched a regional and remote business unit, and this is our demonstration, our commitment to regional Australia, that we will work with you on this journey going forward. We have people located within the regions on the ground. We've got many sitting at the table here today who are working with businesses and individuals at the local level to help them understand what's available to them in terms of connectivity infrastructure and capability to enable this regionalisation agenda. We're working from a structured sector focus to ensure that we've got key industries like agriculture and health and education supported on this regionalisation agenda, and those wishing to make the move into the regions are adequately informed and can make decisions accordingly. We're a very proud founding member of the Regional Australia Council and a long-standing proud partner of the Regional Australia Institute. I'm going to stop there and get into this panel as we go forward. I don't need to introduce Liz Ritchie nor Minister McKenzie, who have had the stage before us, but let me introduce Robert Clayton and Gavin Williams. So Robert Clayton is the Managing Director of Nutrient Ag Solutions, VP and Managing Director of Nutrient Ag Solutions, and has done so for the past 3 years. Originally from a mixed farming enterprise, so wheat, sheep and beef farming in northern New South Wales, Rob holds very strong ties to agriculture in its industry, both across the supply and demand channels. Rob has spent the last 19 years of his career in the nutrient retail business, having held many senior roles across varied geography and responsibilities. Prior to joining Nutrient Ag Solutions, was a partner in a mid-sized logistics firm, I believe, and also headed up a corporate crop production business in the northwest of New South Wales. Welcome to you, Rob.
Thank you.
Gavin Williams, handsome gentleman and my boss, sitting to the right of Rob. Yes, absolutely. Chief Development Officer, Regional and Remote. So Gavin was appointed to this role back in October of 2019. And Gavin brings with him more than 25 years experience within the telco industry, and indeed more than 6.5 or 7 years within NBN now, I believe. Gavin has held leadership roles that span engineering, product management, marketing and strategy disciplines across consumer and business and enterprise, both in wholesale and retail markets. Prior to joining NBN Co, Gavin held positions in Optus, Telstra, and was a principal of an independent consultancy firm. Welcome to you, Gavin. Excellent. So ladies and gentlemen, just online, if I can just encourage you to keep those questions coming through on the Q&A, and I believe we've got a fair few which have come through. But I might just get the ball rolling, Minister, if I can throw the first one to you. You mentioned two very tall gentlemen, one good looking, the other a good personality, no doubt. So with Whitlam and Anthony in your speech, you touched on bipartisanship. How do you achieve this, and what might that look like?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think nothing annoys Australians.
Sorry, just for the online.
The old phys ed teacher that could actually yell across the oval at the Year 8 boys. But the question was around bipartisanship. I choose to approach my work as Minister of the Crown hoping to seek bipartisanship. I think when you are in government, when you have the privilege to actually be running the country, you want to see what you develop and believe in, and the things that you think are delivering for Australians extend long after you leave government, understanding in a country like ours, we take turns. So that is about respect, and it's finding joint outcomes. So, for instance, today I invited Catherine King, the Shadow Infrastructure Minister, Albo, etc., to listen to my address. And so if you're online, guys and girls, look forward to catching up afterwards, but I will be providing them a briefing so that they can understand and appreciate where I'm coming from as a minister. Often, particularly with the regions, one side of politics does, it's just a fact, represent more of the regions than the other. And so I think involving both sides of politics from our perspective in that conversation is essential because we have that lived experience in a more real way than the other side. So I think it is actually just putting ego aside, quite frankly, and focusing on the outcome. And if the outcome is in 3 decades' time, then we need to bring others with us.
Agree totally. It's the long game we're playing here. Absolutely fantastic. Next question is a question for the panel, but I might direct this at you first, Rob, if you don't mind. Over the last 2 years, what are the most exciting changes you've seen in regional Australia?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of excitement in the last 2 years, one, namely rain. So we've obviously had some pretty bad years in 18, 19, and then we're able to jag a couple of good seasons in the last couple of years. I did want to congratulate Minister McKenzie for the commitments that you've just given. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, but Minister McKenzie's been a strong supporter of agriculture for a long, long time, and I know that from previous times. What I would say is what's good for regional Australia is good for agriculture. The biggest thing that I see is technology and a commitment to sustainability from our farmers. I think Minister McKenzie said earlier that farmers were environmentalists long before it was cool to be an environmentalist. But what I see now is a real shift in agriculture's thought processes, sustainability moving from a threat from a government or the laws around that to being an opportunity. And I certainly see a lot of our growers running towards sustainability as an income stream as they go forward. So technology is going to be really key to that. And the reason I look over here is I think connection and digitisation of farms is going to be key to be able to capture that whole sustainability piece for farmers.
Yep, dead right.
Agree. Gavin?
I mean, for me, it's how do we embrace the step changes, the transformations that have been forced upon us with COVID and make them stick. And so, to me, those transformations really have been quite exciting. If you think about healthcare, people I speak to in the healthcare sector, talk about 10, 20 years, decades of transformation being done in months to keep pace with telemedicine and COVID. In the case of workforces being forced to work from home, companies like ours that have tippy-toed into distributed workforces, forced to embrace distributed workforces, and what productivity, if anything's gone up, not down. So it's opened up a whole new sphere of opportunity that the economy, right across the economy, really can be embraced. And let's make sure it sticks.
Fantastic. Liz or Minister, any comments?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely love ag, and I think getting not just the production side right, which add water and some of our farming innovation and your jobs right, it's the processing piece now as well. I think want to see that happening a lot closer to production and getting those supply chains right. For me, I agree totally with what the guys have said, so I won't add to that. For me, though, in addition, the big change I've seen is that we've always approached living in the regions, being from the regions as this deficit. People are surprised you don't have a bit of grass coming out your mouth. People are surprised you actually have a brain and can speak. There's all this stereotype out there in who and what regional Australians are and what we do. I see that as being completely flipped. So instead of it being a negative, you're from the region, poor you, it is positive. And that is something I'm excited to see, because we have to be our best sellers. We have to be very proud of who we are, even though we're different, proud of who we are and where we come from, and to sell that message right throughout the country. And I've seen a shift in how we're perceived, which is good.
Well said. I echo all of that, and I guess the way that I would think about that, and something that we've been really focused on at the Institute, is changing the narrative, and it's happened. And you've heard me talk here this morning. It is our time. We should be so proud of where we call home and where we come from. And so the most exciting changes that I've seen, I touched on the change in, the career opportunities, the opportunity to, live and work where you love and not be governed, to have to move to a capital city, to chase your dreams and ambitions. If we can truly create a national employment market, which we're seeing through the changes that corporate Australia is leading, this is a very exciting turning point. The other piece that I'll touch on that I've loved is and you've mentioned it in your speech, Minister, the importance of livability and the use of this phrase, the understanding of this phrase, livability, and what it means in all its shapes and sizes. It is complex. It is about amenity. It is about the infrastructure that's available in a regional town, but it's also about local leaders understanding what livability means to them and how they can optimise the challenge, the opportunities that they have to close the gaps where they do have barriers, but to work together collectively at a local level to build those strategies to attract and retain the people that you desire to come to the regions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. There's two key themes I just want to touch on in the next couple of questions, if we can. One was around jobs, but before we do, I want to come back to connectivity, which was raised first up. So, Minister, if I can direct this question to you and then invite Gavin for comment, but also for the panel to jump into this one here. The question from the floor here is around that significant investment into telecommunications and the digital economy or connectivity are required to ensure that regional Australia can participate fully in the economy. What are the risks of this investment? What are the risks if this investment isn't made?
Well, if you think about the last decade, I used to teach at a little school called Yarram Secondary College, shout out to Yarram, down in South Gippsland, and I lived in another little country town called Leongatha, about an hour away. Now, I would drive from Leongatha to Yarram, a little over a decade ago to teach, and there were whole chunks of that drive that I'd have to listen to the local FM radio or have a good long hard chat to myself on the way. Now I can drive that drive and be doing radio interviews, be calling my poor staff, friends and family, etc. So if we think back to where we've come from, there has been a significant shift. The amazing thing, and I touched on it in my speech about the entrepreneurial spirit of rural and regional Australians, we are different, we have to be, or you wouldn't survive out here for 2 centuries, is that when we get connectivity, we use it for what we need to, but then we suck it in and do so much more. And so then almost create greater need as a result of having it put down in the first place. And that's what we're actually seeing. So yes, we've solved the solution. Everyone can make a phone call. But now regional Australians wanting the Internet of Things on farm, the telehealth piece, the fact that their students need additional bandwidth to download all their education materials, blah, blah, the list goes on. And so we're taking that very, very seriously. We've invested billions of dollars, not just through the NBN as a federal government, and it was our side of politics that flipped that and rolled it out in the regions first instead of capital cities, as was the original plan. But through mobile base stations, through actually the regional connectivity program, because now that, and in my first iteration as regional Comms Minister, you know, we got hundreds of millions of dollars put into a fund, not to build base stations, but to start getting place-based solutions where the topography or the economics meant you didn't need a base station, you needed some other solution to actually capitalise and build on the economics. We know that when we've rolled out the NBN, when we've actually rolled out increased connectivities into country towns, women's participation in the workforce has shot through the roof, increased by upwards of 20%. Why? Because when we are in regional communities, to Liz's point about livability and being able to volunteer at the netball club, go do reading at your son's school, the livability piece, parents need a lot more flexibility. They don't need to work 2 jobs full-time. They need that flexibility, and connectivity provides that so they can have the family life they want, plus work from home. So we're not stopping now. As I mentioned in my speech, I'm back in charge of regional comms, and we've just completed what's called the RTIRC review, which, for those of you who aren't as obsessed with politics as I am, back when we sold Telstra, one of the things the Nats got for that deal was that we would actually, as a country, no matter who was in power, every 3 years you'd have to review regional Australians' connectivity and report that to Parliament. Was it getting better or wasn't it? So that review has just come down. We're considering that now. So you'll see a response from government around investing further in regional connectivity. But one of the key terms of reference for that review just completed was around stimulating local economies. So less about, can you do Netflix? Can you connect with family on Facebook? Can you make a phone call? They're probably questions. There are still areas where we do need to get that sorted, but they're less. Now it is about how do we prime local economies to be globally impactful through digital connectivity.
Thank you, Minister. Gavin.
Well, I'll just make a couple of quick comments. And the question was kind of framed a bit negatively, what would happen if we don't? And the sort of thing that will happen, I was up in visiting quite a high-tech dairy up in the Central West earlier this week, and they located their operations and they adjusted where they put stuff to get around either real or perceived connectivity issues. And, it broke my heart to hear that. In the case, I heard from my bio, 25 years, sounds better than 30 plus years, which is the real number. But, as an industry, if you wanted to attract a globally competitive industry to come to marvellous Albury-Wodonga, in the past, as a business, you may not have had access to the same kind of services that you'd have got in Burke Street. And if you did have access to the service, you certainly wouldn't have access to the same kind of price.
That's right.
So now we've got an NBN's got we call it business fibre zone, Albury-Wodonga, where you can get access. We'll fibre up the business, so you're able to attract businesses rather than being effectively forced to go to a capital because they can't get access to globally competitive infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Rob.
Well, maybe if I just put an agricultural spin on it. In my mind, you talked about jobs earlier, and this is connected to jobs. Jobs in the bush, really. We're not looking to compete with cities. We're looking for equitable terms with the cities. So, connectivity is going to attract the kind of roles that we're going to need in agriculture as we go forward. Technology is going to be key, and lifting heavy things is no longer the only thing you need in agriculture. My granddad always used to say to me, commitment without currency is counterfeit. So we will need to continue to invest into rural Australia. We will need to invest so that we do have the jobs that are available to be able to be done in rural and regional Australia. Because we need computer technicians, we need satellite technicians, we need analysts We still need the traditional roles, but we need these additional roles. And we are really competing with city-based firms for that war on talent. So that's probably what I would say.
And it's not just governments, by the way. Australia is quite unique in the world that we think the government should come along and do everything. In America, private enterprise built all the railroad. So, you know, come on, business, stump up. We've got great workforce, great. Your staff will love it out here. So I think it is also about private enterprise getting serious about investing in their own future as much as governments backing the regions.
I do think that is absolutely critical. I don't think it's one organisation that can do this. It's not government. It's not only NBN. It's not just Nutrien. It's not all the technology providers. It's really about working together so that we develop world-class solutions for our employees in the bush, world-class solutions for our businesses in the bush.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, we certainly agree with that. We launched a thought leadership paper this week in conjunction with the National Farmers Federation that talks about that, working with the current solutions that are available together, but as an ecosystem, how do you bring it together and take charge and make those decisions as an empowered unit? Let's get back to that jobs piece with connectivity, and this could be a good segue. We know that connectivity is right for the operations of the farm, and we're focusing on agriculture, but this is in a generic sense.
You can go to mining, manufacturing. I mean, in this region itself, like SMEs and mining, manufacturing and engineering workforce is a significant part of this local economy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the common denominator here is that we're looking for communications in a traditional sense to enable the operations, but more and more we're seeing that you need communications for employees from a health and safety and a connectedness perspective. But for employees that want to come out to the regions, they want that connectivity. They want to be able to sit there and stay in contact with their families and friends back in the cities and have the same sort of experience, be able to Netflix and do whatever they need to do. So leads into the next point here. I just want to recognise Stephen Wilmot. Let's just put a question through here, which is about housing. It's this dichotomy. We're looking for jobs, but we can't house these people. Can I start with you, Rob, to get your view on what our challenge is here and how we overcome?
Yeah, I'm definitely not the housing expert, I'd have to say. Yes, I do own one, a very expensive one in Melbourne, unfortunately. So I can speak to that, I guess, is, you know, just the ability to what you can own in regional Australia as opposed to what you can own in capital cities in Australia, and the lifestyle that you can lead, I think is lost on city people. And I think as regional centres, we do a reasonably poor job of making what is available known to our city cousins, I guess. So I'm sorry that's a poor answer to the question, but I do think it is something that can shift the focus.
I'll have to jump in there because that's the segue to the move to more, Rob. That is about educating and raising the awareness for our city dwellers so they know the lifestyle and the opportunities that exist in the regions. But look, I'm happy to touch on the housing. I talked a little bit about in my speech, you know, we know the data is showing us that population has outpaced the housing investment and housing development. But we need to ensure that we're not too hard on ourselves because nobody had a crystal ball to see a global pandemic. What has happened in the last, 12 to 18 months is unprecedented. You cannot build houses that quickly. You cannot get them approved and through planning, and those in the room who understand that. And then you need to multiply that challenge with the job vacancies. There's 71,000 job vacancies that are currently advertised. We can easily double those vacancies at large because we know that many organisations are actually not advertising. I actually have my brother-in-law who works at GrainCorp here in the room who's just hired 2,500 workers for harvest, and those jobs were not advertised. So this is the environment with which we are looking and working within, and we know that we've had some record housing approvals across the last sort of 6 months. So we need to see that come through. And that's why if you know a tradie, you know a builder who's living in the city, tell them to move. I mean, move to more. It is their opportunity.
It doesn't matter whether I'm in Dubbo, Cloncurry, Shepparton, Echuca. I was there speaking to a mayor, housing 1, 2, 3. And Probably one of another issue or burden, which we're not usually accustomed to out in the regions, about homelessness and rental affordability. So they're probably challenges that we haven't traditionally had a lot of experience in, but we are now. A couple of reasons. I say to the mayors, release the land. They can't afford to develop the land as small rural and regional councils. So at a government level, we have a loan facility to actually get the curvature done, get a raft of those enabling infrastructures, so that local councils can, with a local developer, open up some land for development. And I asked the Minister for Housing, Michael Sukkar, around how many regional communities had really accessed this loan facility. Not big uptake. So to any of the mayors, you might not even know about it. So please contact my office here in Wodonga. We'll put you in touch. But that is actually a way at a federal government level we're trying to assist this. We've also launched an inquiry into housing affordability and supply. So we know it is about land. We also know you can't get a tradie for love nor money out in our country towns. And if you can, you're not getting anything built from your bathroom to a house for the next 18 months. That is actually just a reality. And there's also the issue around state governments in some jurisdictions actually taking the ability of local councils to open up that land anyway. It is a complex problem. Industries such as, I've got meat work guys, big, for instance, JBS, they can't get workforce because they actually can't house them. They can get the workers, but they've got nowhere to put them. So it is actually highly attuned to the workforce supply issues as well. Not just about having a nice residence for the GP, but for workers that we need to have our industry done out here. The housing supply issue is increasingly becoming a problem. So there are things on the table, but obviously state governments also have a role to play.
Thanks, Minister. Now, we're nearing the end of this segment, but before I hand back to you, Liz, for some final comments, one more question, if I may, from Leo O'Connor online here. I'm wondering where small towns and small businesses sit in the government's vision for regionalisation and their proposed investment in the regions.
Well, I'm a daughter of a small businessman down the road. So small businesses are the heart and soul of regional communities. 75% of our economic activity in towns and cities such as this one are as a result of small businesses. Farmers are small businesses. They're not just retailers. So the idea that we want big business, the big BCAs, the Jennifer Westcott members, to get out their head offices out here, yes, of course we do. But we know, as a Liberal national government, that our local economies and our local communities are built on the back of small to medium enterprises. Those mums and dads who've put their house on the line to invest in their business, maybe they employ between 7 and 20 people, are actually the backbone of our country towns and our regional capitals. That is why we focus on tax cuts, that's why we focus on infrastructure development, transport connections, and ensuring they have a global supply chain network that they can export their goods and services to. So we see that as number 1, 2 and 3 from our perspective, mums and dads, small business.
Fantastic, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the panel.
Thank you, Sam. Excellent moderation, and thank you to our panellists. Unfortunately, it is time to close today's event, and I'm conscious of our viewers online there. Thank you so much for all of the viewers who've joined us right across the country. As I said, we had over 1,000 people joining us today, which was just incredible, as well as the intimate audience that we have here with us today. And I know many of you will be able able to stay with us and enjoy some lunch. But look, I think that was a really special panel session. And again, I have to thank the Minister, Senator Bridget McKenzie. I think you'll all agree what we've heard today, the pledges that we've heard from our Minister, to be bold, to be bipartisan in her approach. This is a turning point for our nation, and we at the RAI and all of our regional stakeholders and industry stand with you shoulder to shoulder, and we look forward to working with you as we realise the great regionalisation. I would also like to again thank Gavin and Rob for your contribution here today, but also it goes without saying your incredible support as sponsors for Regions Rising. We just couldn't do what we do without your support, and we love working with you. It's a very exciting time to have you as part of the Regional Australia Council, and the Council itself has got a big couple of years ahead, as the Council is actually again working with us to build out our regionalisation framework. So it is an exciting time. As said again to our guests here, it's been so special to have some face-to-face time. So lovely to be back out in the regions and here in Wodonga. We will continue our Regions Rising series into 2022, and we will be getting back on the road, which we're very excited about, and heading to all of our state and territory jurisdictions across 2022. But today's event, I think, has been very special, and it is a turning point. And I hope that you've all felt that. I hope that you've all learnt about, the work of us as the Institute, as the only dedicated think tank in our country that's focused on regional issues, but also we've heard from our government their big plans for regionalisation and for our nation. So in closing, regionalisation, it's our time. Thank you.